The warning lights on the ship's control panel flashed red. Minji's hands moved quickly over the buttons, but she already knew it was too late. 3 Vrakesh military ships surrounded them, and there was nowhere to run. "Minji, what do we do?" Hyun asked from the co-pilot seat. His voice was tight with worry. He was only 25, 3 years younger than his sister, and this was supposed to be a simple cargo run. "We follow their orders," Minji said quietly. "We have medical supplies for the neutral station. We've done nothing wrong." But her stomach felt cold. Everyone knew stories about the Vrakesh. They were reptilian creatures who ruled this part of space through fear. They took what they wanted and asked questions later. The radio crackled. A harsh voice spoke in broken human language. "Human ship, you stop. You come to station now." Their small cargo ship, the Morning Star, had no weapons. Fighting would be suicide. Minji guided the ship toward the massive Vrakesh station that hung in space like a metal spider. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. She had left Earth 5 years ago to see the galaxy, to help where she could. She never thought it would end like this. The docking process was rough. Vrakesh soldiers were waiting when the airlock opened. They were tall, covered in dark green scales, with yellow eyes that showed no emotion. Their armor was black and heavy. Each one carried weapons that could cut through metal. "Papers," one soldier demanded. Minji handed over their cargo documents. The soldier barely looked at them before tearing them in half. "False papers. You are smugglers. That's not true." Hyun stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Those are real medical supplies for sick people. You have no right to—" The soldier's hand moved faster than Minji could see. Hyun fell to the floor, blood running from his nose. Minji started to move toward her brother, but strong hands grabbed her arms. 2 soldiers held her back while others pulled Hyun to his feet. "Take them," the soldier ordered. "Commander Vrek will decide what to do with these mammals." They were dragged through cold metal corridors. The station smelled wrong to Minji, like chemicals and something else she couldn't name. Other Vrakesh they passed looked at the humans with curiosity or disgust. None showed any kindness. Minji and Hyun were separated at a junction. "Hyun!" Minji called out as soldiers pushed her brother down a different corridor. He looked back at her, his eyes wide with fear, before disappearing around a corner. "Where are you taking me?" Minji asked. The soldiers didn't answer. They led her deeper into the station, down levels that grew darker and colder. Finally, they stopped at a large metal door. The door opened into a round room with high walls. It reminded Minji of pictures she had seen of old Earth arenas where people fought for entertainment. The floor was smooth metal, and bright lights shone down from above. She could see an observation deck high up on one wall, behind thick glass. The soldiers pushed her inside and the door slammed shut behind her. Minji was alone in the arena. She walked to the center, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. Above, she could see movement behind the glass. Someone was watching. A speaker crackled to life. "Human female." The voice was cold and amused. "I am Commander Vrek. You will provide entertainment today. We have heard interesting stories about your species. Stories that say you have a strange effect on creatures from other worlds. We will test this." Minji's mouth went dry. She had heard stories too. Stories of Vrakesh bioweapons, creatures they bred and trained to kill. "What do you want from me?" She called up to the observation deck. "Nothing," Vrek replied. "I simply want to see you die. It will teach other humans not to enter our space. Now let us begin." 6 doors opened around the arena's edge. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Minji heard sounds that made her blood run cold. Clicking noises, low growls, the scrape of claws on metal. The creatures that entered the arena were like nothing Minji had ever seen. They were the size of large dogs, but they moved like cats. Their bodies were covered in black scales that seemed to drink in the light. Strange markings along their spines glowed red, pulsing like heartbeats. Their eyes were silver and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. Razorlings. Minji had heard of them but never seen one. They were cubs, not fully grown, but still deadly. The Vrakesh bred them to be perfect killers, training them from the moment they hatched. These 6 had probably never known anything but pain and hunger. The creatures spread out, circling her. Their movements were smooth and coordinated. They had done this before. Minji's mind raced. She could run, but there was nowhere to go. She could fight, but she had no weapons and no chance against 6 predators. Above in the observation deck, she heard laughter. They were waiting for her to panic, to run screaming. That's what they wanted to see. Minji took a slow, deep breath. Back on Earth, she had worked with animals. Abused dogs, traumatized cats, wild creatures that humans had hurt. She had learned that fear was contagious. If you showed fear, animals felt fear, and frightened animals were dangerous. But calmness was contagious too. Minji sat down. She crossed her legs and placed her hands gently in her lap. Then she closed her eyes. The laughter above stopped. In the silence, Minji could hear the razorlings moving closer. Their growls grew louder. Their hot breath touched her face. She could smell them now, a sharp chemical smell mixed with something more natural. Minji focused on her breathing, in and out, slow and steady. She imagined herself as a still pond reflecting the sky. No threat, no fear. Just presence. Something touched her cheek. Not teeth, but something softer. A nose, maybe. Minji kept her eyes closed. She heard a confused sound, almost like a question. The circling stopped. The growling faded. Minji could hear the razorling's breathing change from aggressive to uncertain. She counted to 10, then slowly opened her eyes. The largest cub sat directly in front of her, its head tilted to one side. The red glow along its spine had shifted to orange, then yellow. The creature's silver eyes were fixed on her face, studying her with an intelligence that surprised Minji. The other 5 cubs had stopped attacking too. They stood in a loose semicircle, watching their leader, waiting for a signal that never came. Minji looked at the large cub. She didn't smile or reach out. She simply acknowledged it, the way she would acknowledge another person. The cub's markings shifted again, this time to a soft blue-green color Minji had never seen described in any report. Above, Commander Rex's voice exploded through the speaker. "What are you waiting for? Attack! Kill her!" But the cubs didn't move. They stood around Minji, confused and uncertain, as if they had forgotten what they were supposed to do. For the first time in their short, painful lives, the razorlings had encountered something they didn't understand. They had been taught that mammals were prey, that soft creatures must be destroyed. But this human showed no fear. She offered no violence. She was simply there, calm and present. And in that moment of confusion, something deep inside each cub stirred, a memory older than their training, older than their conditioning, a memory of safety, of belonging, of being more than just weapons. The large cub took a step closer to Minji, then another. It lowered its head and gently pressed its nose against her shoulder. The touch was tentative, questioning. Minji remained still, barely breathing. She could feel the creature's heartbeat, fast but slowing. She could sense its confusion turning into something else, something softer. One by one, the other cubs moved closer. They didn't attack. They didn't even threaten. They simply came near, drawn by something they couldn't name but desperately needed. In the observation deck, Commander Rex's rage was building. This wasn't supposed to happen. This couldn't happen. His perfect weapons were failing him, betrayed by a single unarmed human who had done nothing but sit still. Next to Rex stood Master Handler Kron, the massive Vrakesh who had raised these cubs from eggs. Kron's expression was unreadable, but his eyes never left the scene below. He had trained hundreds of razorlings. He thought he knew everything about them. But he had never seen this, never even imagined it was possible. In the arena, Minji finally allowed herself a small breath of relief. She wasn't safe yet. She knew that. But for now, for this moment, she was alive, and 6 confused, frightened young creatures were learning that not everything in the universe wanted to hurt them. It was a beginning. A strange, impossible beginning that would change everything. Hours passed in the arena. Minji still sat in the center, and the 6 cubs remained around her. They no longer looked like killing machines. They looked like what they really were, young, confused creatures who had been hurt too many times. The large cub, the leader, had settled beside her. Its body was tense, ready to move at any moment, but it stayed close. Minji could see scars on its scales, marks from training that had been brutal and cruel. She wanted to reach out and touch it to offer comfort, but she knew better. Trust took time. Above in the observation deck, Commander Rek was pacing. "This is unacceptable," he hissed to Master Handler Kron. "Your creatures refuse to kill. They are useless." Kron didn't answer immediately. He was still watching Minji and the cubs. Something about the scene troubled him but also fascinated him. In all his years of breeding and training razorlings, he had never seen them behave this way. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should observe longer." "No," Rex snapped. I will make them remember their purpose. He reached for a control panel on the wall. His clawed finger pressed a red button. In the arena, all 6 cubs suddenly screamed. It was a horrible sound, full of pain and fear. Minji jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. The cubs were thrashing, their bodies twisting. The blue-green glow on their spines turned violent red. Foam appeared at their mouths. Stop it! Minji shouted toward the observation deck. You're hurting them. But the pain continued. Each cub wore a thick collar around its neck, and those collars were now causing terrible agony. It was how the Vrakesh controlled the Razorlings through punishment and fear. The large cub stumbled toward Minji, its legs shaking. But instead of attacking her as Rek expected, the creature turned around. It positioned itself between Minji and the observation deck, facing the source of its pain. The cub's silver eyes were fixed on the glass window above, and a low growl came from its throat. The other 5 cubs followed their leader. Despite the terrible pain from their collars, they formed a protective semicircle around Minji. They were defending her from the ones who hurt them. Minji didn't think. She moved to the large cub and placed her hand on its neck, just below the collar. She could feel the creature trembling, fighting against the pain. Without words, she began to hum. It was a low, steady sound, something she used to do with frightened animals back on Earth. A vibration that said, "You're not alone." The cub went still under her touch. Its breathing slowed. The red glow began to fade, shifting to orange, then yellow. Minji moved to the next cub, then the next, touching each one gently, humming that same low note. One by one they calmed. The pain was still there, but they had something to focus on besides their agony. In the observation deck, Kron's hand shot out and grabbed Rek's wrist. "Stop," he said firmly. "Release the collars." His voice held an authority that even the commander respected. Rek glared at him. "Why? They must learn to obey. If you continue, you will damage them permanently," Kron said. "These cubs represent years of breeding work, millions in investment. The human has somehow interfered with their conditioning, yes, but if we keep using pain now, we may lose them completely. They could become too broken to use." It wasn't kindness that made Kron argue. It was calculation. These razorlings were valuable property. But Rek heard the logic in Kron's words. Slowly, reluctantly, he released the button. The pain stopped. In the arena, the cubs collapsed. The smallest one, covered in scars from previous training, fell against Minji's legs. Without thinking, she knelt and gathered the small creature into her arms. It was heavy. Its scales cool against her skin, but it curled into her embrace like a frightened child. The cub's eyes closed. For the first time in its life, it felt safe. Minji looked at the other 5 cubs lying around her, their flanks heaving as they recovered. The large one met her gaze and slowly, deliberately lowered its head onto her knee. Minji understood then what she was seeing. These creatures had been conditioned to be weapons, trained through pain to attack anything soft and warm. But conditioning wasn't the same as nature. Deep inside them, beneath all the cruelty they had experienced, was something older and stronger. The need to belong, the desire for safety, the hope for kindness. She had given them a choice even if she hadn't meant to. And they had chosen her. Above, Rek was making plans. "Fine," he said coldly. "We will leave her with them. No food, no water. Let us see how long this peace lasts when hunger sets in. Eventually, she will show fear. She will try to take food from them. And then their training will reassert itself. Then they will kill her." Kron nodded slowly. It was a logical plan. Humans needed water more frequently than razorlings. The woman would weaken first. And yet something nagged at him. Something he couldn't quite name. He had spent his entire life working with these creatures, breeding them, training them, controlling them. He thought he knew everything about razorlings. But watching the cubs arrange themselves around the human, watching them relax in her presence, he realized he might have been wrong. Perhaps he had never really understood them at all. In the arena, Minji was giving each cub a name. She did it quietly, speaking in Korean, the language of her childhood. She named the large leader Daeho, which meant great hero. The scarred small one she called Bomi, meaning spring or new beginning. The others became Yuna, Junho, Sora, and Taeyang, sky, summer, and sun. The cubs didn't understand the words, but they responded to her voice. Each one lifted its head when she spoke to it. Their markings glowed soft blue-green, a color that represented contentment in their species. though the Vrakesh had never seen it before. Time passed slowly. The lights in the arena never changed, making it impossible to tell if hours or days were passing. Minji grew thirsty, then very thirsty. Her throat felt dry and her head began to ache. But she didn't complain. She didn't show distress. She simply stayed calm. The cubs noticed. They pressed closer to her, their body heat keeping her warm when she started to shiver. When she lay down to rest, they formed a circle around her. Teho positioned himself at her head, his body blocking the harsh light from her eyes. Bomi curled against her chest, a living blanket. Small cleaning drones entered the arena periodically, automatic machines that swept the floor. The cubs learned to hunt them, using their natural speed and intelligence. They disabled the machines carefully, not destroying them but stopping their movement. Then they would bring the pieces to Minji, like cats bringing gifts to their human. Minji praised them each time, even though she had no use for broken drones. The cubs purred at her approval, a sound like rocks grinding together. It was a sound they had never made before, one that confused Kron when he heard it through the observation deck speakers. But as more time passed, Minji weakened. She tried to hide it, but her movements became slower. Her skin grew pale. She was dehydrating, and there was nothing she could do about it. The cubs sensed something was wrong. They became agitated, making worried sounds. Teho paced, his markings flashing anxious yellow. Elsewhere in the station, Hyun was working on an escape. His cell was crude, designed to hold species much stronger than humans. The lock mechanism was electronic but simple. Using a piece of metal from his belt buckle, he had been carefully working at the control panel. It took hours of patient effort, but finally the door clicked open. He moved through the corridors silently, avoiding patrols. He had to find Minji. He had to get them both off this terrible station. Using access panels meant for maintenance, he tapped into the station's security network. What he saw on the monitors made his blood run cold. Minji was in some kind of arena, surrounded by the most dangerous-looking creatures he had ever seen. But they weren't attacking her. They were lying around her like protective dogs, and his sister looked sick, her face drawn and pale. Hyun also saw something else on the security feeds. Vrakesh soldiers gathering in a staging area, checking weapons. He heard their conversation through the audio pickup. Commander Vrek was done waiting. He was going to gas the arena, kill everyone inside, and be finished with this embarrassment. The attack was planned for 1 hour from now. Hyun's mind raced. He couldn't fight a squad of armed soldiers alone. He needed help. And there was only one person on this station who might possibly listen. The one who kept watching his sister with an expression that wasn't quite cruelty. The massive Vrakesh who stood next to Rek in the observation deck. Master Handler Kron. Using the station's internal communication system, Hyun sent a message to Kron's private channel. It was risky. Kron might simply alert security. But Hyun had seen something in the way Kron watched the cubs. The Vrakesh cared about those creatures even if his care was cold and practical. The message was simple. Your cubs will die with my sister. Help us escape and you keep them. Let Vrek kill her and he kills them too. Shoes in his private quarters, Kron read the message 3 times. He looked at the security feed showing the arena. The human woman had slumped over, barely conscious. The cubs were clustered around her, making distress calls. Little Bomi was pressing against her chest, as if trying to keep her warm. Kron had bred hundreds of razorlings. He had sent them to die in battles across the sector. He had never cared about individual creatures before. They were products, weapons, tools, but these 6 cubs were different. They were the smartest. Minji woke to the feeling of cool liquid in her mouth. She choked, coughed, then realized someone was giving her water. Her eyes opened slowly. Everything was blurry at first, then focused. A massive Vrakesh stood over her, holding a water container. The cubs were around her, tense and alert. Daiho stood between Minji and the Vrakesh, his markings flashing red. A low growl rumbled from his throat. The other cubs had formed a defensive wall, ready to attack despite their size difference. Easy, the Vrakesh said in broken human language. His voice was deep and careful. I help. Drink more. He set down the water container and backed away several steps, his hands visible and empty. Minji recognized him from the observation deck. This was Master Handler Kron, the one who had raised these cubs, the one who had hurt them, but he was offering help now and she desperately needed it. She reached for the water container with shaking hands. Minji. Yun's voice came from behind Kron. Her brother pushed past the large Verkesh and ran to her side. He knelt and helped her drink. I thought you were dead. I saw you on the security feeds and you looked so... His voice broke. I'm okay, Minji whispered. Her throat was raw, but the water was already helping. She looked at Kron. Why are you helping us? Kron's yellow eyes moved from Minji to the cubs, then back. Commander Vrek will kill everyone. You, your brother, and all 6 cubs. In 40 minutes, soldiers will gas this arena. We must leave now. You're betraying your own people, Yun said suspiciously. Why? Kron looked at the cubs again. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he said simply, these cubs are mine. I made them. I will not let them die, and they will not leave without her. He pointed at Minji. Minji struggled to stand. Her legs were weak, but Hyun and the water had given her new strength. How do we escape? The station is full of your soldiers. I have transport cages, Kron said. For moving dangerous specimens, the cubs must go inside. We move through service corridors to the docking bay. Your ship is there. My transport is there. We take both ships and run. The cubs won't go in cages, Minji said. She could see the fear in their eyes when Kron mentioned it. They had been caged before, tortured in small spaces. Then we all die here, Kron said flatly. There is no other way to move them past security. Minji looked at the 6 cubs. They watched her with trust in their silver eyes. She had asked nothing of them so far, made no demands. But now she needed them to do something terrifying. She needed them to trust her completely. She walked to the transport cages that Kron had brought. They were metal boxes with barred doors, barely large enough for each cub. Minji opened the first cage herself, then sat down beside it. She looked at Daeho and spoke softly in Korean. The words didn't matter. Her tone said everything. I'm asking you to be brave. I won't let anything happen to you. This is temporary. Daeho approached slowly. He sniffed the cage, every muscle in his body tense. Then he looked at Minji one more time and stepped inside. He barely fit. Minji closed the door gently and rested her hand on the bars. Daeho pressed his nose against her fingers. One by one, the other cubs followed Daeho's example. Yuna went next, then Junho and Sora. Taeyang hesitated the longest, pacing nervously, but eventually entered his cage. Little Bomi was last. She whimpered as Minji closed the door, a sound that broke Minji's heart. I promise this won't be for long, Minji whispered to each cage. I promise I'll get you somewhere safe. Kron looked at her with an expression that might have been respect. You have power over them that I never achieved, he said. They obey you without pain. Without fear, how? I don't have power over them, Minji replied. They're making a choice. She didn't say what she was thinking. A choice you never gave them. They moved quickly. The cages were on magnetic sleds that Kron controlled with a remote. They traveled through narrow maintenance corridors that smelled of oil and chemicals. Twice they heard Verkesh patrols passing nearby and had to wait inside passages, barely breathing. The cubs stayed silent in their cages. Their trust in Minji was absolute. Even when alarms began blaring throughout the station, even when they heard soldiers running past, they remained quiet. Their markings glowed anxious yellow, but they didn't cry out. They found the arena empty, Kron said, checking a small screen on his wrist. Vrek knows we are escaping. Security is locking down the docking bay. Can we get there before they seal it? Hyun asked. Perhaps, Kron said. But there will be soldiers. Many soldiers. And they will shoot to kill. They reached a cargo corridor, the last passage before the docking bay. Through the corridor's end, Minji could see their destination. A massive space filled with ships and loading equipment. She could also see at least 20 Vrakesh soldiers forming a barricade. We'll never make it past them, Hyun said. He had taken a weapon from a security locker they'd passed, but one stolen gun against 20 trained soldiers was hopeless. Kron tried to bluff. He stepped forward, pulling the cages behind him. I am transferring dangerous specimens, he called to the soldiers. Commander Vrek's orders. The soldiers raised their weapons. No transfers authorized, their leader replied. You are ordered to stop and surrender the humans. Energy beams cut through the air. Hyun pulled Minji behind cover as the corridor erupted in gunfire. Kron grabbed the cage sleds and dragged them back. They were pinned down, trapped between the soldiers ahead and more security forces that would soon come from behind. Minji looked at the cages. The cubs inside were terrified, pressing against the bars. They could hear the fighting, smell the burning metal from the energy weapons. Their instincts screamed at them to run, to hide, to fight, but they were locked in boxes, helpless. "We have to let them out," Minji said. "No," Kron said immediately. "They will be killed by the soldiers." "They'll be killed anyway if we stay here," Hyun argued. "And so will we." More energy beams struck near them. The soldiers were advancing, calling for their surrender. Minji made her decision. She crawled to the first cage and opened Daeho's door. The large cub burst out, his scales bristling. Minji pointed toward Hyun and Kron, then toward the advancing soldiers. One word, protect, Daeho understood. This was the moment Minji had been dreading. She was asking these cubs, who had finally found peace, to become violent again, to use the skills the Vrakesh had tortured into them. But now for a different reason. Not because they were forced, because they chose to. Minji opened all 6 cages. The cubs emerged like shadows, their movements suddenly predatory. But they didn't rush forward mindlessly. They looked at Minji first, waiting for her signal. She nodded once. The cubs moved. Daeho and Yuna went left, their scales shifting color to blend with the corridor walls. Hunho and Sora took the right. Taeyang and Bomi stayed close to Minji, forming a living shield between her and the enemy. The Vrakesh soldiers suddenly found themselves facing the very weapons they had created. But these razorlings fought differently than expected. They were coordinated, intelligent, working as a real pack. They disabled weapons instead of killing when possible. They herded soldiers away from the humans rather than slaughtering them. When one soldier aimed directly at Minji, Junho leaped and took the energy blast in his own body. His armored scales absorbed most of the impact, but he still cried out in pain. Minji shouted his name, and the cub turned his head to look at her. His markings pulsed blue-green even through his pain. He was okay. He was doing this for her. The soldiers began to fall back, confused and frightened. They had trained with razorlings, knew how to use them as weapons, but had never faced them as enemies. The cubs' tactics were unpredictable, merciful where they should be vicious, smart where they should be simple. "Move," Kron shouted. He led the way into the docking bay while the cubs held off the guards. Minji and Hyun ran after him, their hearts pounding. Behind them they could hear the cubs' battle cries, the soldiers' confused shouts, the clash of scales against armor. They reached the Morning Star, their small cargo ship. It looked untouched, ready to fly, but between them and the ship stood Commander Vrek himself, surrounded by elite guards with heavy weapons. Vrek's scales were dark with rage. His yellow eyes focused on Minji. "You," he hissed. "You have corrupted my weapons. You have turned my own handler against me. You will die here, human. You and your animals." The 6 cubs burst into the docking bay behind Minji. They were wounded, breathing hard, but still ready to fight. They positioned themselves between the humans and Vrek's forces. Daeho moved to the front, his silver eyes locked on the commander. "Surrender the cubs and the traitor Kron," Vrek said. "I will let you humans leave." "You have my word." It was a lie and everyone knew it. But Vrek thought Minji's compassion would be her weakness. He expected her to try negotiating, to try saving everyone. He expected her to fail. Minji stepped forward to answer. But Daeho blocked her path with his body. All 6 cubs moved to the front, forming a wall. Their markings blazed brilliant blue, the color of determination and choice. They weren't following Minji out of conditioning or even love. They were making a choice. And they chose to stand. Then something unexpected happened. Throughout the station, in holding areas and training rooms, other razorlings began calling out. The sound echoed through ventilation systems, a strange harmonious cry that no one had heard before. Adult razorlings, older specimens were. The heavy weapons fired. Energy beams cut through the air toward the cubs. But before they could strike, something crashed through the docking bay's far entrance. Then another. And another adult razorlings poured into the bay. 23 of them, some scarred from battles, others younger but still larger than the cubs. They had broken through their containment throughout the station, drawn by the cubs' signal. Now they stood between Rex guards and the small group trying to escape. The guards' weapons shifted target, uncertain. These were the station's own bioweapons, supposedly loyal to the Vrakesh. But the razorlings' markings glowed colors that had never been seen before. Not the red of aggression or the cold blue of conditioning. Something warm and alive and new. The largest adult razorling approached slowly, Kron recognized it immediately. That's the Alpha, he breathed. The first specimen I ever trained. The most dangerous killer we have. This creature had ended hundreds of lives. It was the Vrakesh Empire's perfect weapon. The Alpha walked past the cubs, its massive body moving with deadly grace. Every guard tensed, ready to fire. The creature stopped 3 meters from Minji. Its silver eyes studied her with an intelligence that was almost frightening. Minji stood still. Her heart was racing, but she kept her breathing steady. This creature could kill her in seconds. One swipe of its claws, one bite, and she would be dead. But she had learned something important from the cubs. Fear was a choice. Trust was a choice. She began to hum. That same low, steady sound she had used in the arena. The vibration that said, "You are safe here. You are seen. You have worth beyond what they made you to be." The Alpha's massive head tilted. Its markings cycled rapidly through colors as if it was experiencing emotions it had no names for. Confusion, anger, grief. And then, slowly, something that looked like hope. The creature lowered its head and pressed it against Minji's chest, directly over her heart. Minji placed her hand on the Alpha's scarred head. She felt tears in her eyes. This creature had been hurt so much, trained through pain and starvation, forced to kill for years, and yet somewhere inside it still remembered what it had been meant to be, what it could still become. One by one, the other adult razorlings approached. Some were cautious, some eager. Each one came to Minji and acknowledged her in their own way. A touch of the nose, a lowered head, a soft purring sound. They were making a choice just as the cubs had. They were choosing to be more than weapons. Commander Vrek watched his entire world collapse. His bioweapons program, the foundation of Vrakesh military power, was unraveling before his eyes. If this spread to other facilities, if other razorlings learned they could choose, the Empire would lose its greatest advantage. Fire. He screamed at his guards. Fire on all of them! Destroy everything! But the guards hesitated. They had trained with razorlings. They knew these creatures' capabilities, and now they faced nearly 30 of them, all protecting a single human. It would be a massacre, and the guards weren't sure which side would be massacred. Vrek made his final, desperate move. He reached for the station's emergency controls and activated a complete atmospheric purge. Red lights flashed throughout the bay. A mechanical voice announced, "Depressurization in 5 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately." Vrek was willing to kill everyone, including his own soldiers, rather than let this knowledge escape. The guards broke ranks and ran for emergency exits. Some grabbed their commander and dragged him away despite his protests. In moments, the bay was empty except for Minji's group and the razorlings. "We have 5 minutes, Yen said urgently. "The Morning Star can't fit everyone. We'll die out here." "My transport," Kron said, pointing to a large ship across the bay. "It's designed for moving live specimens. It can hold all the razorlings and maintain life support. But someone must pilot the Morning Star separately." "I'll take the Morning Star," Hyun said. "Minji, you go with Kron and the creatures. Keep them calm during the flight." He grabbed his sister's shoulders. "Meet me at the coordinates for the neutral trading station." 3 jumps out. "If I don't make it, you'll make it," Minji said firmly. "You're the best pilot I know." "Now go." They split up. Hyun ran for the Morning Star while Kron led Minji and the razorlings toward his transport. The creatures followed without hesitation. They trusted Minji, and she trusted Kron to get them to safety. It was a fragile chain of trust, but it was all they had. The transport's cargo hold was large, designed to carry dangerous animals. But it wasn't comfortable. The razorlings climbed aboard quickly, their movements efficient. Some of them looked at the restraint harnesses with fear, remembering pain. But when Minji entered the hold and sat down among them, they relaxed. 2 minutes, Kron's voice came through the speakers. "Secure yourselves. This will be rough." Minji couldn't secure everyone in 2 minutes. There wasn't time, so she did the only thing she could. She started humming, that low, steady sound that meant safety. The razorlings pressed close to her, forming a living cushion. The cubs clustered nearest, with little Bomi in her lap. The adults surrounded them in protective layers. The transport lifted off just as the depressurization began. Minji heard the horrible sound of atmosphere being sucked into space. The ship shook violently as Kron pushed the engines to maximum. Warning lights flashed. Metal groaned under stress. The razorlings held Minji in place, their bodies absorbing the worst of the impacts as the transport was buffeted by escaping air. She felt claws grip her clothes carefully, not hurting but securing, felt warm scales press against her, felt the steady breathing of 30 creatures who had chosen to protect her. Then they were clear. The shaking stopped. Through the cargo hold's small window, Minji could see stars in the dark shape of the Vrakesh station behind them. Atmosphere venting from multiple sections. She also saw the morning star flying parallel to them. Hyun had made it. First jump in 30 seconds, Kron announced. Everyone hold position. The jump was disorienting, a feeling of being pulled in all directions at once and then snapped back to normal. Several of the razorlings made distressed sounds. Minji kept humming, kept her presence calm and steady. The creatures settled again, trusting her to guide them through this strange experience. 2 more jumps followed. Each time the razorlings grew more comfortable with the sensation. By the 3rd jump, some of them were actually making curious sounds, interested rather than afraid. They were learning, growing, becoming more than they had been. Finally, they reached the neutral trading station. It was a massive structure, home to dozens of species who came to trade far from any empire's control. The station's security contacted them immediately. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves and your cargo." Kron handled the communication. "This is Kron, former master handler of the Vrakesh bioweapons program. I am requesting asylum. I carry live specimens that require care and protection." There was a long pause. Then razorlings. "You're bringing razorlings here? Are you insane?" "These razorlings are different," Kron said. "They are not weapons. They are refugees, and they are under the protection of a human named Minji. If you wish to verify this, speak with her." Minji took the communication device with shaking hands. She was exhausted, dehydrated again, and overwhelmed by everything that had happened. But she spoke clearly. "My name is Minji. I'm a human cargo hauler. These creatures were prisoners, tortured and forced to kill. They're not dangerous unless you make them dangerous. Please, they just need a safe place to rest." Another pause. Then a different voice, older and calmer. "This is Station Administrator Kelvin. We've been hearing strange reports from the Vrakesh sector. Something about a human and razorlings. I assume that's you." "Yes," Minji said simply. "Then you may dock," Kelvin said. "Bay 17. But understand this. If those creatures cause any harm, any violence, we will not hesitate to destroy them. The safety of this station comes first." "I understand," Minji replied. "Thank you." They docked carefully. Kron's transport settled into the bay with the morning star beside it. Hyun was already out of his ship when Kron opened the cargo hold. Minji's brother froze when he saw the razorlings, so many of them, all looking at him with those silver eyes. "It's okay," Minji called from among them. "They're peaceful. They won't hurt you." The razorlings filed out slowly, staying close together. They were in a strange place, surrounded by new smells and sounds. Some of them were injured from the escape. All of them were stressed. But they followed Minji calmly as she led them to a corner of the bay where they could rest. Station security arrived, armed and cautious. They kept their distance but watched everything carefully. Administrator Kelvin came too, a tall alien with blue skin and multiple arms. He studied the scene with wise old eyes. "I've never seen razorlings behave like this," Kelvin said. "Calm, coordinated, almost gentle." He looked at Minji. "What did you do to them?" "Nothing," Minji said tiredly. "I just gave them a choice. I showed them they didn't have to be weapons. They did the rest themselves." Kelvin watched as little Bomi approached him cautiously, her markings a curious yellow. The cub sniffed his robes, then looked back at Minji as if asking permission. Minji nodded. Bomi gently touched her nose to Kelvin's hand. The administrator's expression softened. "I see," he said quietly. "You've given them back something the Vrakesh took." 6 months had passed since the escape. Minji stood on the observation deck of what had become known as Sanctuary Moon, watching the razorlings play in the red sand below. They weren't playing like weapons or killers. They were playing like the intelligent pack animals they had always been meant to be. Daeho and Yuna were teaching the newest arrivals how to hunt without killing. They chased small drone targets that Hyun had programmed, working together to disable them. It was still hunting, still using their natural abilities, but with purpose and restraint. The young ones learned quickly. This moon, abandoned for years after mineral mining operations failed, had become a refuge. Word had spread through the sector about the human who freed razorlings. Ships began arriving secretly, carrying specimens that Vrakesh facilities wanted to dispose of, cubs who refused to attack, adults whose conditioning had broken, the damaged ones who had been tortured too much. Minji took them all. Some could be helped. Others were too broken, their minds shattered by years of pain. For those, Minji and Kron provided peace and comfort in their final days. It was the least they could do. The sanctuary now held 47 razorlings of various ages. It wasn't easy managing them. There were fights sometimes, instincts that couldn't be completely unlearned. But with patience and consistency, Minji had helped them form healthy pack structures. Real families, not the cruel hierarchies the Vrakesh had forced on them. Kron appeared beside her on the observation deck. The massive Vrakesh looked older now, his scales duller. Betraying his empire had cost him everything. He could never return home. But as he watched the razorlings below, his expression held something Minji had never expected to see. Contentment. The breeding pair is ready, Kron said quietly. If we allow them to mate, their offspring will be the first razorlings born free. Never conditioned. Never hurt. We can learn what they truly are. Will they be safe? Minji asked. The cubs, I mean. Some of the adults still have violent tendencies. The pack will protect them, Kron said. That is their nature, to protect their young, their family. We took that from them. Now they can have it back. Minji nodded. Below, little Bomi had grown significantly. She was still the smallest of the original 6, but she had become one of the gentlest. New arrivals always went to her first, sensing her calm nature. She had become a kind of ambassador, showing others that peace was possible. There's a ship requesting permission to land. Hyun's voice came through the communication system. It's not one of the secret transports. This one is broadcasting official Vrakesh diplomatic codes. Minji and Kron exchanged glances. They had known this would come eventually. The Vrakesh Empire couldn't ignore what was happening. Their bioweapons program had been falling apart for months. Facilities reported razorlings becoming unreliable, refusing orders, choosing mercy over violence. Let them land, Minji said. But prepare defensive measures. This might be a trap. An hour later, Minji stood in the sanctuary's main facility facing 3 Vrakesh officials. They wore robes instead of armor, a sign of diplomatic status, but she could see the calculation in their yellow eyes. These were not friends. The leader spoke in careful human language. I am Council Representative Dreka. We come to discuss the situation regarding our biological assets that have relocated to this facility. You mean the razorlings you tortured, Minji said bluntly. The creatures you stole from their homeworld and turned into weapons. Dreka's scales rippled with irritation, but his voice remained calm. Your actions have caused significant problems for the Empire. Our military doctrine was built around razorling deployment. Without them, we are vulnerable. Some in our government see this as an act of war, and others? Kron asked, stepping forward. Dreka looked at the former master handler with barely concealed disgust. Others see an opportunity. The Empire has been built on conquest and fear. Perhaps it is time to consider a different path. He turned back to Minji. But we cannot simply abandon centuries of breeding programs and military investment. We need a solution. What kind of solution? Minji asked warily. Teach us, Dreka said simply. Show our handlers what you know. How to work with razorlings without conditioning. How to make them effective without pain. The creatures would still serve the Empire, but as partners rather than slaves. Minji felt anger rise in her chest. You want me to help you continue using them as weapons? Just nicer weapons? I want to prevent a war, Dreka said, his voice hard now. There are factions in our government that would rather destroy all razorlings than allow them to exist outside our control. Better to adapt than to annihilate. But if you refuse to help, those factions will gain power. It was a threat disguised as a request. Minji understood immediately. Help the Vrakesh change their methods, or watch them kill every razorling in existence rather than lose control. I need time to think, Minji said. You have 3 days, Dreka replied. Then we require an answer. The Vrakesh delegation left, their ship lifting off into the red sky. That night, Minji couldn't sleep. She walked through the sanctuary's outdoor areas, where many razorlings preferred to rest under the stars. They noticed her passing and some followed, a quiet procession of curious creatures. She found the alpha resting on a large rock, watching the moon's rise. The massive razorling looked at her as she approached, then shifted to make room. Minji sat beside the creature that could kill her so easily, yet chose not to. "What should I do?" she asked the alpha. "If I help them, I'm supporting their military. If I refuse, they might kill all of you." The alpha couldn't answer in words, but it placed its large head on her shoulder, a gesture of trust and comfort. Other razorlings gathered around, including the 6 original cubs. They formed a circle, their markings glowing soft blue-green in the darkness. Deho made a low sound, questioning. Minji looked at him and suddenly understood. These creatures had made their choice 6 months ago. They had chosen to trust her, to follow her, to change. Now she had to trust them to make their own decisions about their future. "I can't decide for you," she said to the assembled razorlings. "You're not mine. You don't belong to anyone. If I help train Vrakesh handlers, some of you might choose to work with them. Others might stay here. Some might go back to their homeworld someday. But it has to be your choice. Always your choice." The razorlings responded with various sounds. Some were uncertain. Others seemed almost eager. They had been trapped in cages or on this moon for months. Maybe the idea of purpose, of being useful but not used, appealed to them. 3 days later, Minji gave her answer to the Vrakesh Council. "I'll help train your handlers, but under conditions. First, no more breeding programs. You work with the razorlings you have, and when they die, that's the end. Second, any razorling can leave your service at any time. No punishment, no retaliation. Third, I supervise everything. If I see cruelty, if I see conditioning through pain, the deal ends." Dreka considered this. "The end of breeding programs will be difficult to accept, but I can present these terms to the council. Give us 1 month to decide." That month became 3 months of negotiation. During that time, something unexpected happened. Ships from other species began arriving at Sanctuary Moon, not to drop off razorlings, but to learn. They had heard about the human who understood predators, who could calm dangerous creatures with just her presence. They brought their own problems. Dangerous specimens they couldn't control, former military animals with trauma, creatures that had been abused or abandoned. Minji couldn't help all of them, but she tried. And the razorlings helped too, showing other species that change was possible. Finally, the Vrakesh Council agreed to Minji's terms. Not because they wanted to, but because their military was falling apart without functional razorlings. The first group of handlers arrived for training. They were suspicious, hostile, convinced that Minji's methods wouldn't work. Minji started with the basics. "Razorlings are not machines," she told them. "They're intelligent pack animals with emotions and needs. When you hurt them, you don't create obedience. You create fear, and fear makes them unpredictable." She showed them how to read razorling body language, how to understand their color signals, how to build trust through consistency rather than punishment. Many handlers refused to believe it would work, but a small few, were willing to try. Those few handlers were paired with razorlings who had volunteered to work with the Vrakesh again. Not as slaves, but as partners. The alpha was among them. The great creature had chosen to return, not because it was forced, but because it wanted to help change how its species was treated. Months turned into a year. The program grew slowly. Some handlers failed, unable to abandon old methods, but others succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Razorlings working as partners proved to be far more effective than those controlled by pain. They were creative, adaptive, willing to take risks because they trusted their handlers. News of this spread throughout the sector. Other species began reconsidering how they treated their own military animals and work creatures. Not everyone changed. Many still preferred control through force. But a conversation had started. A possibility had been shown. On a warm evening, Minji sat on the red sand outside the sanctuary watching the sun set. Bomi lay beside her, now fully grown but still gentle. The other 5,